It was around that time at the turn of the century that Robison Park was all the rage. Ladies dressed all in white and men in their straw hats took a special open-air trolley from Spy Run, 7 miles northeast of town along the St. Joe River. There they enjoyed roller coasters, dancing under the moonlight, shooting galleries, bowling alleys, a merry-go-round, photograph studios, steamboat rides, and theatrical productions day and night. Some people saw their first movie at Robison Park. There were plenty of places to eat and buy fine candies. For nearly 20 years, Robison Park was the community's greatest recreational outlet.
Oh, I heard my grandmother talk about that a lot. She went there as a teenager, usually with a bunch of girlfriends, and they'd always run into boys they knew. She talked about how pretty the river was there and the woods surrounding the park. There was a ride similar to what I can figure out in my head at least, a toboggan run, where people sat in a boat and it flew down a chute into the water. She said you always got wet, but you went anyway. There are still some concrete footers and other remnants left from the park in that area. I've seen them.
The carousel is still in operation today at a park in Logansport, and you can find souvenirs around from Robison Park now, 90 years later, although you'd be hard-pressed to find people willing to part with them. When Robison Park was closed down in 1920 by the streetcar firm that owned it, due to decreased revenue, some of the buildings, including the wooden roller coaster, were dismantled and moved to Triers Park in what is now Sweeney Park, on the west side of the St. Mary's River. For the next 30 years, Triers Amusement Park was the fun place to go in the summer for exciting rides, great music, and dancing. The Cyclone, as the roller coaster became known, provided the thrills and chills. A miniature train provided a more relaxed ride. There was a fun house and a house of mirrors, a penny arcade, a Ferris wheel, and a ride called the Scooter. The dance hall was huge and featured famous big bands on occasion. On Kids' Day, a special day each summer, they threw pennies out of the rides to the kids below, and that day the rides were only 2 cents. After World War II, park attendance declined, and it was finally closed in 1953, after a fire destroyed the roller coaster, dance hall, and funhouse. That wasn't the only thing the Trier family brought to Fort Wayne. Before Triers Park, they operated the dance pavilion at Robison Park, and before that, around 1911, Trier's Minuet Dancing School across from the Palace Theater. In the late 1920s, they were teaching between 2,000 and 3,000 new dancers each season. Another way people had fun was a trip to Municipal Bathing Beach along the St. Joe River just below the North Anthony Dam. It was created in 1936 by the city, who cleaned up the banks and trucked in sand. Diving boards and floodlights were added, and lifeguards were hired to stand watch. It opened in July and was a big hit. Reportedly, over 7,000 bathers took advantage of the beach each day that summer. There was a fear that the river might be unsafe because of possible contamination from local sewage, but the Board of Health gave its approval and the scare ended. During the polio epidemic of the 40s, the beach was closed because some feared the virus was being spread via the water. Because of the public's on and off concern for the purity of the river water, the beach was eventually closed for good.
Oh yeah, my mom wouldn't let us go to the beach at all because she was positive that's how people got polio.
My husband thought it was funny that we actually had a beach on a river in Fort Wayne. I thought it was kind of neat. We had some great times. I learned to swim there.
Before the beach was closed, recreational opportunities grew with boxing rings and softball diamonds. As a matter of fact, it was the original home of the very popular Zollner Pistons fastball team. Those national champions were so talented that no other team could fairly compete with them. From 1940 until 1957, they consistently won the National Fastball League Championship. In 1947, Fred Zollner built Zollner Stadium, and the team moved there from the beach. Even though the team is gone, the stadium still remains on North Anthony. And the old ball diamond by Municipal Beach, near Johnny Appleseed's grave, is now called Carrington Field.
I went to a lot of Pistons fastball games when the stadium on Anthony was brand new. They just never lost, it seemed. And the ball, most of the time you never saw when it was pitched. It was so fast.
We had the biggest crushes on the players. We'd hang around down by the fence, hoping they'd all come over and talk to us. But of course they never did. but we got a few winks in here and there.
They were tremendous ball players. Watching them in the outfield, it always looked like they were having fun. I just thought it would be so amazing to get paid to play ball.
1 year before the Pistons fastball team began, Zollner organized the Pistons basketball squad, and they became a national powerhouse as well. The team, following the lead of their prized long shooter Bobby McDermott, introduced a new, fast-paced passing game to the sport and held their own as National Basketball League champions in 1943, 44, and 45, and world champions in 1946. The team was the pride of Fort Wayne for 17 years, until 1957, when they moved to Detroit.
They played in the Northside Gym, my school, on my court. I hope some of their moves would magically rub off on me when I stood at the top of the key during my team practice. They just seemed so smart and cool. I really put each player up on a pedestal. They were quite the inspiration for lots of boys that hope to play basketball for a living someday. I still have a ton of the game programs, and even one has autographs. I think I won that at one of the games.
We had crushes on them too. We hung out at coffee shops we heard they frequented, just hoping to get a glimpse of them in street clothes. Boy, I guess we were pretty boy crazy then. We didn't care about the game of basketball at all. We just knew they were cute and winners.
Don't forget the Daisies. They were winners too and provided a lot of exciting baseball, especially during World War II. We needed a little entertainment around here instead of air raid drills. We all worked pretty hard, so it was a real treat to go to a doubleheader on a Sunday afternoon at Memorial Park Stadium.
I remember they always drew a big crowd. They were easily as good as the men, real fan pleasers. It was more of a show with them for some reason. Those women made some amazing plays, and they played in skirts, believe it or not.
The Daisies were a part of the All-American Girls Professional League. They had 4 of the league's top 10 hitters. In a 3-year period, they attracted 78,000 fans to their games here in Fort Wayne. That was 62% of the population then. Admission price was 74 cents, but worth much more. There was a baseball field here known as League Park, and it had a long history. Built in 1883 between Clinton and Calhoun, it was home to many professional teams and saw the likes of Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig. In 1930, it was destroyed by fire. An angry fan was suspected. It was rebuilt immediately, but smaller, and by 1939, the buildings which had begun to fall apart were torn down. A few years before League Park was raised, another landmark was torn down as well. The old post office was located at Berry and Clinton Streets from 1889 to 1932, until the new Federal Building on Harrison Street across from Lincoln Life was built. In 1904, the new library was built on the corner of Webster and Wayne Streets. This impressive Greek Revival building was raised in 1965 to make way for the new and equally impressive modern version of the Allen County Public Library. In 1962, another grand old Greek Revival-styled building was raised, the Hannah Homestead on East Lewis Street. Built by one of Fort Wayne's most prominent founding fathers, the home stayed in the Hannah family until it was given to the Fort Wayne Community Schools, which used it as a school for handicapped children until 1962. It's now the site of the Hannah Homestead Park. Perhaps one of the most dramatic losses in recent history was that of St. Mary's Church on the corner of Jefferson and Lafayette. The beautiful brick church with its tall steeple that towered over the city was built in 1887 by a strong German Catholic congregation. On the second day of September in 1993, the grand old beauty was struck by lightning, which started a fire that destroyed the church. After crews cleaned up the remaining rubble, all that was left was a hole in the heart of downtown Fort Wayne. St. Mary's Church, lost but not forgotten. Just down the street from the old Greyhound bus station stood the Jefferson Theater, across from the embassy. It opened in the early 1900s and claimed to be the largest and safest theater in the state, running films that, quote, carried an element of refinement and education, as well as entertainment, unquote. The Temple Theater, located in the old Masonic Temple, introduced silent motion pictures to Fort Wayne in 1897. That great music hall had a colorful ending. A discarded cigarette on the stage set the whole theater aflame. But perhaps more spectacular was when the fire reached the 4th floor of the building. That was where the Fort Wayne National Guard stored more than 50,000 rounds of ammunition. It took over 4 hours to get the unplanned fireworks display under control. Actually, Colerick Hall was probably one of the first theaters located in Fort Wayne. Located on the north side of Columbia Street, between Clinton and Barr, it played host to early minstrel shows and traveling theater groups in the early 1800s. There was the Maumee, the Wayne, and the beautiful Empress Theater at the corner of Wayne and Clinton Streets, which presented clean, wholesome, and high-class vaudeville acts for 10 cents. The Orpheum and Lyric theaters attracted large crowds on the weekends. The Majestic on Berry Street, just east of Clinton, served as a vaudeville house, a movie house, and then the home of the Civic Theater until 1957. The next home of the Civic was the Palace Theater, which saw everything from the early production of Hellzapoppin', which later went on to break attendance records on Broadway in 1941, to the first run of Walt Disney's animated classic, Pinocchio. Many think that the Embassy was the most ornate movie house this town has ever had, but actually the spectacular Paramount Theater, built around the same time, was just as ornate, if not more.
You know, most of the drive-in movie theaters are gone too. Those were an important part of my childhood. My folks would load us into the car. We were already in our pajamas, along with a big grocery bag full of popcorn, and we'd head off to the drive-in. I can still hear the sound of the people walking in the gravel past our car and the sound of someone throwing an empty cup out of the car window. Normally we were asleep before the movie was even over, but I remember once waking up as my dad slowly drove over each of those small little hills between the rows of speakers on the way out. I think he was just having fun.